That's Manchester Central Library in front of me. And directly across the road is the Friends Meeting House. Hi, I'm Rick and welcome back to another one of my videos. I'm here in Manchester, just behind the Central Library, to visit the Quaker meeting house behind me and its former burial grounds. This is an amazing story of a graveyard being totally removed over a period of 12 months and the remains placed in a new location in Sale, 5 miles down the road. Some graves remain here and around the building, but the Jackson Road Deansgate graves were totally removed, and we'll take you down there shortly. At the side of the Quaker house here in Manchester, there are some graves that were originally put here, and because they weren't under threat, like the graves at the bottom of Jackson's Row, they still remain in situ now. This burial ground is one of the oldest in Manchester. It was opened for burials in the last quarter of the 17th century and was in use until 1847. Like the burial ground on Granbury Row, this burial ground also fell victim to grave snatchers. In 1828, a local man named John Massey entered the burial ground and stole the body of Mary Howcroft. He was later apprehended and sentenced to 3 months in prison. 30 years after the final body was interred in this cemetery, the bodies were excavated from this site in 1878 and the land was redeveloped. The former burial ground lies underneath this building, 201 Deansgate. This is Jackson's Road today. As you can see, it slopes uphill towards the Quaker house up there, and as you go down Jackson's Row, it runs towards Deansgate over there. It's hard to imagine that all these bodies and cemeteries were placed here. Deansgate was massively busy. I can imagine it being cobbled, and right next to it here was a cemetery. It's a totally different city now. You can still see the cobbles in the road, which ran all the way up Jackson's Row. In 1901, Century Buildings was erected on this site of the former burial grounds. By 1953, the site was once again empty, possibly a victim of bombings in the Second World War. In 1847, it was the height of the Industrial Revolution. The city was growing fast, and land where the Quaker burials was under threat of being built upon, and the memory of the graves becoming another lost part of Manchester's history and gone forever. This is the top end of Jackson Row, heading away from Deansgate. It gently slopes uphill. There's a lot of construction happening right now, and I wonder if anything ever turned up in this area. As we continue to walk up the slopes, you can see the old buildings that are hidden by the modern buildings that surround Manchester now. This is the top end of Jackson's Row. Directly in front of me is South Mill Street. And the building that's now in front of me is where the old Quaker house is. The whole of the ground inside the walls was excavated to a depth of 11 feet more or less. The total number of disinterments was 702. The contents of each grave were carefully collected together and placed in varnished boxes. The boxes were removed in the early hours of the morning, once a week, in a covered van, and placed in a brick vault. The boxes being placed in rows corresponding with those from which they were taken, 1 copper and 2 lead coffins were also found. They must have been very important people because they were very expensive at the time. This is a remarkable story of the Quakers taking the remains of their past friends and reinterning them to a new site 5 miles down the road in Sale. Let's continue the story on Park Road in Sale, just outside Sale's town centre. Welcome back. I'm here with Paul from Wicked Acorn. Everyone recognises Paul from his videos around Sale and around the area of Manchester. Well, we're here outside the Quaker meeting house in Sale on Park Road, just off Ashton Lane near Sale town centre. There are thousands of practising Quakers in Britain, with around 500 meetings around the country. Today, 17 Quaker meeting houses across England have been celebrated through listings. Hertford is the home of the earliest surviving purpose-built Quaker meeting house in the world, and it's still in use today. It was built in 1670 and its listing status upgraded to 1 in recognition of its exceptional significance. Unfortunately, the meeting house behind us here has not got listed status, but hopefully in the future it will gain listing. If we look at the entrance here, it runs in a horseshoe shape right round to the meeting house here and out of the grounds, and basically could be Sale's first one-way system. Shortly we're going to meet some kind people to tell us about the meeting house and the history of the grounds. And we'll also see where the grave interments from Manchester were finally laid to rest.
So Chris, when was the meeting hall built?
There's a fairly easy answer to that. There is the notice. It says AD 1856.
Chris, thanks for that. Could you just tell us, this is from the outside of the building, I believe that this was the stables. So would you said this was the entrance here?
The entrance was here, yes. I think these windows didn't exist. It wasn't glass. I think that goes into our kitchen now. Yeah.
So this side goes into the kitchen there. So potentially there was a door. There was a larger window here.
Yes. I don't know. Have you photographed the Swift boxes?
Tell us about it.
We've been approached to ask if we could have some Swift boxes because the birds called swifts are getting fewer in number, and this is going to try and encourage them to come.
And when did you get your sign put up? I know you took a long time to get the sign put up, but you know,
yes.
it's the first thing you see when you come in here. It's inspiring.
I don't know. I mean, several years ago, maybe 3 or something like that.
And this building's next to the meeting house. What's that's current use, or what did it used to be?
It's called the cottage now. It was there for the caretaker of the meeting, but for as long as I can remember, it's been a dwelling house, and it's let out.
Thank you.
This just shows you when the burial ground was started. If you look along the edge, there are stones with letters on, and if you go along the other way, there are numbers, so that each grave has a letter and a number, and there's a map recording where people were buried. The stones were all moved to the edge here in the 1960s, 70s, in order to make it easier to maintain the mowing of the grass.
So the stones are not where the bodies are buried. They've been moved for convenience.
Are the bodies still on site here somewhere?
On the site somewhere, yes.
In the grass, and
there's a map that shows along with this.
And there are 4 squares up there that have these stones that indicate where people are buried. There isn't anybody buried in this patch of grass here. Which is 2019. Chris, you should explain about the months.
Yes.
so I'm looking at the way that the graves are dated. They're dated differently to what I think we're traditionally used to. So I see it's died the 20th of the 6th month 2019, and rather than doing the 20th
It's a standard words for everyone, and this is to do with equality. And perhaps this is the most obvious feature of this burial ground. Everyone gets the same word, their name, the month, and the date when they died, and how old they were when they died. And that's all. Everybody's exactly the same, however much money you might have had in life.
Looking at the flowers, because we're now in early May, I just see a line of forget-me-nots. Was that something that you put in there yourselves?
I would like to think so, but I have no idea how they got here. Maybe some of the others do. Judith? Well, it's a good idea anyway.
Yeah.
We should do it next year.
Yeah. I visited Manchester yesterday, and the story of the graves being taken from Manchester, brought all the way 5 miles to this rural land as it was then, and someone felt as though they had to do that. I believe that they're buried over in this section here.
Yes.
Do you mind if we go and have a look?
Okay, and I've got some of the description that was made about how it got here.
Fantastic. Hi Chris, yes, I spent an hour yesterday up near Jackson's Row, where these burials were taken from central Manchester and brought here. What was the sense of why you thought that they needed to do that?
Because the government, why we needed to move these bodies from there? Well, because they wanted to develop the land in Deansgate. So there had to be some, they would call it resting place, I'm sure, for the bodies. But there's an account in the local history section of the Central Library, and I've taken bits of this which describes what happened, and I've really enjoyed that. You will see that there's numbers and there's letters, and that shows where each of these burials were put. So you can see the place where each body was buried. All right, the work was commenced on the 29th of the 9th month in 1876, and it was completed in 1877. I'm just going to say that the whole of the ground inside the walls in Deansgate was evacuated to a depth of 11 feet more or less, and the certainty of no remains being left in the Deansgate site was ensured. The total number of disinterment was 702. The contents of each grave were carefully collected together and placed in varnished oak boxes, the lids being screwed down and the screwed heads being sealed over. Right, and then, this is the bit that I most enjoy, the boxes were removed early in the morning at the end of each week in a covered van to the burial ground at Ashton-on-Mersey, which is what they called this, and deposited in the brick vault for their reception. Okay, so it was rather like a funeral. At the end of each week, they brought bodies that had been put into boxes and here, and they made a very careful note of exactly where they were.
And how long did that work take? I believe it took a year to complete.
Yes, a little less than a year, from September to the following, what's the 5th month?
We're currently in it, that will be May. So to take 702 bodies and carefully put them in a place where people can remember is really respectful. Is that something that
Yes.
the Quakers naturally do?
Be respectful, I'm sure. In a covered van they put them. It must have been quite a ceremony each day.
Well, it would have been a horse-drawn, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And then 5 miles up the road with cobbles and
and they
just
had
rolled.
already excavated this, and they called it a brick vault.
So this basically a vault. So all this land round here, when the site was founded, was all green land. There was none of
Yes.
the natural buildings that we've got today.
No, that's right.
And this stone here, when was that stone placed there? Is it something new? Because it looks relatively old.
I think Margaret got that restep because it deteriorated with the weather. No, that's fairly new now.
No, it's not new. It's been cleaned.
It's
but
been
I didn't-
cleaned and
the original.
the writing been made clearer. These are the rows. But then there's not anything with colour.
When was that?
The numbers go that way and the letters go that way.
So are these actual graves here? Or are they like,
The bodies are not there.
the bodies are not
The
here?
Bodies are in the squares
this
in
area.
the middle.
But
The-
you
the-
have to look at the map to find out
Right.
where exactly.
So
if
if
you
I
want,
wanted to find this person, he might be in
he might be
4H
Yes,
or...
Yeah.
that's exactly. Yes,
Rolling.
10 months, 8 months, and
So these are all children.
these are all children. Yes. Ah, this is the one I was trying to remember.
And what's this person's name?
Florence Andrews died in 1907, aged
2 days.
days.
Wow, how sad.
But we haven't learned how to live with cholera nowadays.
So majority of these could be cholera deaths or stillbirths, and
Yes,
No-
just in these days, the death of young children was very common, wasn't it?
yes, it was.
Yes.
So
Okay.
Bradshaw, is that the railway
That's-
Bradshaw?
That's right, the railway man.
He was a Quaker.
He was a Quaker, and everybody expected that when he died, he would be here. But he was in fact in Oslo at the time.
Oh,
And he died there, and there's a memorial to him there. So this is all the Bradshaws that we have here, that they are all members, wife, children of Bradshaw, but not George himself. He was out of the country. Lucy was presumably a daughter. She died at the age of 18. Wonder what happened.
any number of things in that era.
Yes.
So, walking around the site, I see all the graves and the children's graves at the top, and the interment graves up here. But I didn't actually see that there were cremations here as well. When was the first cremation here?
The first cremation here was 1940, but
I can see-
there was some considerable discussion about having a columbarium, and then of course obviously it's now full. So very recently, this last week, we interred the ashes of somebody up in the area near where the children's graves are. So people are, because cremation is so much more popular these days, people are either having their ashes scattered here or interred. Though some people choose to have their ashes scattered anywhere, so it doesn't have to be in this ground.
No, that's great, because everything is all neat and all laid out, and it all looks as it's got a purpose. So
Yeah, well, the grounds are maintained by volunteers, so it's been really quite difficult to keep it under control. The burial ground was opened in 1856. The cottage was for the caretaker, who would be present here to open up the meeting house if there was a burial, because between 1856 and 1860 there wasn't a regular meeting for worship. It wasn't until 1860 that the first regular meeting for worship was held here.
And that's the cottage behind you with the stone on there, the AD 56.
Yes, exactly.
As you see, this garden has been very well tended. It takes a lot of work, and also the mowing of the grass, which is done by volunteers at the moment. Friends have been rather short of money during the COVID period because the number of rentings of rooms has dropped considerably, but things are on the up now.
Thank you very much for inviting me and Paul here today. It's been fascinating, and when the wider public sees and hears about your work, they'll be as surprised as I was. So thank you all for your time. I consider you a friend already. So that's brilliant. So I look forward to coming to one of your meetings one day. When I'm not working, I work 6-7 days a week. But really appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.